Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eirik. Welcome to my studio and to my YouTube channel. You are watching an excerpt, a short section of my Patreon exclusive series, available to my patrons who support me with $5 or more. The full-length video is over 40 minutes long and full of valuable information. To see the full episode, you have to go on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Eirik Arnesen. There is a link in the description below. You have to be a Patreon supporter of $5 or more in order to see the videos. Once you become a supporter, you will instantly have access to the videos. You will find the videos by clicking the post button here. The videos should appear if you have pledged $5 or more. You can refine your search at the top of the page here. For now, however, sit back, relax, enjoy some royalty-free music, and me sculpting the structural core of my half-life size sculpture. With my centerline drawn and established, I can begin to build out the egg, or the ribcage. One thing you'll see is that my egg perhaps won't resemble an egg at all very much. I'm not actually after creating an egg or a ribcage. This is more of an undersized simplification, representation that I can build my actual contours on top of. One of the keys being underbuilt. I need room to build on top of this. Room to search for my actual contours. I'm likely to make mistakes during this search, but if I give myself enough room, I can continue to grow the sculpture while solving my mistakes. Life becomes a lot harder if I start having to go back and forth a ton. That's how you lose track. Going back and forth or adding a lot of clay at once are the safest way to get lost. The best way to avoid getting lost is keeping track of your structure, going slow and correcting mistakes as they become obvious. Going slow ensures mistakes don't go too far before they become corrected. We speak a lot about working flexible at the Florence Academy of Art. I might have mentioned it in this video series as well, if not I will now. I know I've talked about it a lot on my YouTube channel. The idea is for your sculpture and the process to be flexible. You being flexible enough to rip apart your sculpture at any moment if there are too many mistakes or something you cannot fix is not what I mean when I say stay flexible. People seem to misunderstand this all the time. Make sure your work is flexible. Work in a flexible manner. Set yourself up for flexibility. Don't work willing to be flexible with your work. Make sure the work is flexible and open to change. The ribcage is actually not that visible on my model at all, which is typical. Human anatomy follows a pretty similar blueprint. From the front and the back view, in contour, it's actually only the bottom part of the ribcage that is visible. As you can see here, most of the ribcage disappears under flesh. So what does this mean for us? It means we actually don't need to sweat too much about making a perfect ribcage. You can't see most of it anyways. What we want to make sure, however, is that we have symmetry on both sides. The ribcage is tilted at the same angle as the center line running through it, and so it needs to be symmetrical 90 degrees across, perpendicular to that center line. I want to make sure of this in order for the ribcage to appear solid. A ribcage without symmetry will appear as soft and not solid, which doesn't sell the illusion that this is bone. It stops functioning as a structural object as well. If you want your sculpture to appear solid, like it has internal bony masses and could stand and breathe on its own, make sure you have symmetry in your bony structures. From the side view, I'm extremely conservative and I don't grow my ribcage very much. Just as the pelvis has a tilt to it, the ribcage has a tilt to it. When we stand upright, the pelvis tilts forward and the ribcage tilts backwards. When we sit down, this relationship will often reverse, depending on how you sit, of course. Just as I established the tilt of the pelvis from the side view, I want to establish the tilt of the ribcage from the side view. This allows me to later have something that is already headed in the right direction to build my contours on top of. Anything that I can do to get something right, even if it's small, I'll take at this stage. I remember hearing a painter talk about how it's good to get easy stuff out of the way, things like painting the background, as it brings the overall painting closer to what it is supposed to be in the end. I'm not sure if this is true for painting actually, but for me at least, I try to get things moving in the direction that is right and that brings my sculpture looking closer to my model. It becomes easier to compare model to sculpture the closer you get the sculpture to look like your model actually. Of course, you then balance on that knife's edge again, of getting things too close and making things difficult to adjust and change. Nothing is more difficult than a sculpture with a million small drawing mistakes. All those tiny mistakes added up becomes a huge discrepancy. Which is, again, another reason to go slow and fix each mistake as they appear, and before there becomes too many and it becomes too difficult to find anything right to relate all else to. So how do I figure out the tilt of the ribcage? By finding some bony landmarks, of course, and relating them to the bony landmarks I have already established. The ones I've already established are the points relating to the box, mainly the two aces points, and of course the pit of the neck and the C7. The pit of the neck and the C7 are oriented from the side view when we oriented the armature. When we built the box, we oriented the two aces points to work with the ankle and the C7 as well. Now we can refine the position of the C7 and the pit of the neck by slightly pulling them apart from each other as we add a little bit of width to our ribcage from the side view. The neck needs to fit in between them, of course. We don't need to know the exact width yet, however, but we can place them a little bit more specifically further apart now that we have their height established well and other elements have been placed. Keep track as you go, however, so you work things in the correct directions and move towards making things more right rather than wrong. Leaving a bit of space to grow further outwards is always useful and my suggested approach. Here you can see how the C7 and the pit of the neck relate to the aces points and the ankle vertically. I use my plumb line and measure this quite often. Some of this measuring is cut out of the video, but I spend a lot of time looking and measuring, making sure everything works and lines up the way that it does on my model. Here is an image of what I attempt to make the preliminary contours of my egg or ribcage look like. You'll notice the red lines sit inside the contours of the figure. I'd probably make them a bit further in than this actually, just to be safe and give myself more room rather than less. This establishes a bit of a tilt without running into the outer contours too much. The reason it's so much further in on the back than in the front is because on the back there are scapula or shoulder blades, and they jut out quite a bit. The upper part of the chest is pretty much just ribcage, with little to no muscle on top. There is an angle break in the sternum hidden behind the breasts. I take this into account as well, of course, from the pit of the neck to the bottom of the sternum, or the solar plexus, as you probably know it. It's not a straight line. It has at least one angle break to it. However, on women this is hidden by the presence of breasts, and on men by pectoral muscles. I fill in the section below the ribcage as well, which is commonly known as the belly. There needs to be clay here anyways, so even though my model is quite slender, it's still helpful to have something to build my contours on top of. The same thing goes as before. As long as I stay within the borders of my model, I'll be fine. Many people build the contours in the next stage as these tall, fragile walls traveling up and down the figure. And while this works, it is fragile, it dries out fast, and it is prone to being moved, pushed, or bumped. So I like to give myself a little bit of clay to begin building these walls on. They won't need to be so tall this way, and they won't be so fragile. Let's thank today's sponsors, my Patreon supporters on Patreon, who have ensured the continued existence of this channel and allowed me to upgrade my gear bit by bit, making better looking and better sounding content for all of you watching. If you are interested in supporting the channel, or perhaps interested in getting personal feedback on your sculptures from me, then Patreon is the place for you. You'll get in-depth feedback on techniques and how you can apply them to your own work. Anything sculpture related goes. We can talk about armatures, supplies, mold making, anything you need help with in your sculpting endeavors. So check it out, there is a link in the description below. Thank you so much to those of you who have given generously and supported me. It really means the world. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you made it to the end of the video, please shoot me an email, let me know what you think. Was the video helpful at all? Did it clarify something for you about the process I use? I hope it did. For me, making sure I'm set up well at this stage is key to success. Well-established structures that will be easy to hold on to through the entire process is key in order to sculpt a solid figure with convincing internal anatomy. Without convincing internal anatomy, the external anatomy won't convince anyone with a sharp eye. You might be able to fool some random onlooker with surface details, but it's the well-structured internals that will yield the most convincing sculptures. This episode took me a total of 3 hours of sculpting to do well. Make sure you take your time and do it properly also. Thank you so much for watching the second episode, and thank you so much for being my patron, helping support me make sculptures and videos. I hope this video can help you a little bit in your own career as a sculptor, and feel free to send me an email with any questions you might have regarding this process. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.